we still have a lot of open questions about the family separation policy at the border. Now, that executive order that the president signed, he said solved everything, but this thing far from sealed and delivered. Kids, they're frankly scattered everywhere, including many in our area, and that is 2,000 miles from the border. That means they could be 2,000 miles, if not more, from their parents. It also means several different courts and jurisdictions that are involved there, and many concerns abound about how and when and if families will be reunited, and also those legal challenges that could scuttle the whole thing. And for more on that, I'm joined now by Sarah Pierce. She's from the Migration Policy Institute. She's kind enough to give us a few minutes. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Let's first start with the declarative statement. When the president said, okay, I've solved the problem, families won't be divided anymore, by any measurement, that's a falsehood. Families not only are still divided, but there's a great likelihood, if not a probability, that many children and their parents will not be reunified.
Absolutely. The president's executive order was actually silent yesterday on what's going to happen to the thousands of families that have already been separated.
All right, let's go through some timelines and some numbers and explain for folks how Flores matters here and the 20-day clock. And to give a little bit of a backgrounder, and please expand on it, but the short of it is, basically, it's a court order that happened in 2015 that said you can't detain a child, a minor, for more than 20 days. And while the president said, okay, we're not going to, make sure we're going to abide by that, and the kids won't be kept basically segregated from the families for more than 20 days, he still has a zero-tolerance policy on the board, which means the parents most certainly will be detained for more than 20 days, if not even deported before then. So how do you basically take those two disparate facts, sometimes opposite facts, and somehow reach a conclusion that parent and child will be together?
Under President Trump's executive order yesterday, families are going to be held in detention as long as it takes to either prosecute the parents and put those families through immigration proceedings. That means President Trump's executive order flagrantly will violate those federal court orders coming out of California. That's why in his executive order yesterday, he also ordered Attorney General Sessions to file a petition with those courts in California saying that Flores should be rolled back or limited in this case so the president can continue detaining families for long periods of time and really indefinitely.
Now, one of the things I think, Sarah, that surprises people is at how many different detention centers these kids are being kept in so many different states and parts of the country. Pardon me for being a little cynical here, but was the reasoning because there just wasn't enough places and they're spread around everywhere? Or is it possible they wanted to put them in so many places because that would mandate so many different district courts would have to hear different cases for so many different kids that it would drag this process and make it that much more difficult?
It's an interesting viewpoint, but it actually relates to a system that we have set up for unaccompanied child migrants. In 2008, we set up a special system for these children in which they're transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services. That department then redistributes the children throughout the country to different sponsors or licensed facility and places the children in these long-term immigration proceedings. When President Trump began separating families at the border, he reclassified those accompanied children as unaccompanied children. And those children were then put into this specific system that we have for accompanied children and distributed across the country as a result.
Now, explain, and we know this is not brand new. We've already seen incidents where, for a year now, parents haven't been able to locate their child, and to this day don't even know where their child is when the child and parent separation took place. How difficult is it, and how equipped is this particular administration and government in knowing exactly where all the children are and their parents? I know one of the questions to Secretary Nielsen is, where are the girls? Because we'd only seen pictures to this point of the boys, and she couldn't answer that question. Do they have a good accounting as to where all these kids are and their parents? Or would the public be shocked at just how much dislocation in this organization is actually on the ground?
I think it's extremely shocking, the lack of likelihood that these parents and children will ever be reunified. The parents, after they go through prosecution, they're kept in the custody of the Department of Homeland Security. Expedited removal proceedings. Under those proceedings, most people are deported from the country within a few days. Meanwhile, the children, like I talked about earlier, have been placed throughout the United States in licensed facilities or with sponsors and are in long-term immigration proceedings that go on for years. This administration has not put any system in place to try to link back these parents and children's immigration cases. And while they're waiting to do so, it's more and more likely that the parents are going to be deported from the country without their children. Reunifying them would require a massive logistical effort, and we've seen nothing out of the administration so far indicating that they're willing to take that on.
So finally, Sarah, for anyone at home who thinks the last we've been talking about these children and their parents with the flourish of a signature of the president, we're going to be talking about this, unfortunately, for a long time because there's still more questions than answers.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't see any end in sight on this issue.
Sarah Pierce, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks, when we come back, I'm going to turn this over to Andrew. He'll take a closer look at some issues closer to home. Albany wrapping up its legislative session. We'll take a look at what got done, what didn't. Plus, former Syracuse Mayor Stephanie Miner, she's entered the race for New York governor. We'll examine why she's running and whether or not she's going to make a difference when it's all said and done. Stay with us.